Now we're going to ask Tiziana to
Okay, so it's coming.
tell. Yes, yes. And if you want to do it at the podium, or if you want to do it sitting, that's up to you. Huh?
I think I'll stay here.
Okay.
Thank you, Pierre. So yes, I'm gonna change the tone a little bit. Yesterday I gave a very technical or theoretical, as I should call it, talk at the London School of Economics about the implication of the technical dimension on getting the platform right, the economic thinking behind it, and the social element. So I'm not going to repeat that. So I thought that in this context, maybe I can tell you a story. I can tell you a little bit of a story about my involvement with Robinhood first, and now EXA. So maybe to give you a sense of where, what some of the forces, some of the elements, or some of the thinking and the directions that are also in the DNA of this project, so to speak. So I would like to go back to 2014. 2014 was the year where in Amsterdam the first Money Lab conference was launched by the Institute on Network Culture, directed by Gert Lovink, who's a kind of central figure in the net critique and the whole critical approach to the internet. So it was a strange thing, right, to have a money lab. What the concept of a money lab? How was it possible to talk of a money lab in 2014? It was possible because of what has been said before about Bitcoin. Bitcoin brought the whole question of money into the domain of technical, cultural, and social thinking. And this opened a new domain of reflection and experimentation for various kinds of artists, activists, militants, hackers, engineers. And I was there, I was invited to speak at the Money Lab conference. I was invited because I had written a paper called Red Stack Attack, Algorithms, Capital, and the Common. And that stack attack had been written as a kind of a solicitation coming from the activist network I was a part of, and I'm still a part of in Italy, to bring together the kind of thinking about software, technology, algorithms, and Bitcoin, together with Marxist concern, Marxist political economy, about the current form of class struggle. So I was part, I'm still a part, as I said, of this Free University Network, which is a collective where people like Toni Negri and Cristian Marazzi, economists like Carlo Vercellone, Andrea Fumagalli are a part. And they've been building up as a kind of counter-tendency in relation to what had been the straightforward rejection of finance by activists. They've been building up an argument which was about the changed form of money, how financialization, I think it was Cristian Marazzi who kind of put it very clearly at some point, financialization in the 1970s had been an answer of capital to the new demands of put by trade unions, put by the refusal of work of the new generation. The urban crisis of New York of 1979 was pointed out as a key example. So the approach, the idea that we had developed, a free university network means that you don't have a real university building, that you meet, you have seminars in social centers, in Casa del Popolo, the old kind of communist, Italian Communist Party seats, which are still in places like Genoa or Passigneto. So we met every month, every 2 months, to discuss changes in the form of capital and changes also in the composition of class. So as part of this discussion, as part of this theoretical engagement with the new economic conditions, came the idea that finance was not just a kind of evil, giant, evil force of capital that we had to confront, but that financialization was both the new form of control of labor, because we are controlled through our indebtedness, through our incapacity to access capital as form of investment. Maurizio Lazzarato reminded us how in Marx you have these two circulations. You have the little circulation of money, which is about the wages you get, and the wages you get, you can pay your rent, you can pay your food, and you can pay maybe your iPad or your installment for your phone bill, and that's it. But then there is the other form of money, which is a form of finance, and with that form of money you can really do big things. You can really create world. You have the power to affect the future. You have the power to affect the world. Saskia Sassen opened the Money Lab the Money Lab conference. There was a reader coming out after that talking about this number, $1 quadrillion. $1 quadrillion, she said, in 2014 was the amount of money that was the value stored in the stock market. And she said, what kind of number is that? What has happened to money that you can have? You could never say, I have 1 quadrillion kilos of gold. That's impossible, unless the alchemists of the kind of 17th century managed to actually make it, but then the money would be worth nothing. Instead, gold would be worth nothing if there was 1 quadrillion kilos of gold. But instead, 1 quadrillion of digital dollars, virtual dollars, made a huge difference in terms of how the power balance in the world worked. And my comrade's argument in Italy was that this kind of heavy financialization was an answer to the fact that with time, with struggle, what used to be called the working class and called more living labor had become more and more capable of autonomy, more and more intelligent, more and more capable of self-organization, so that the only way to stop it from actually taking over and kind of developing its own capacity to shape the world was to make it dependent on that, was to tell it that, you can do this, you can do that, to make it, to return it to a condition of kind of subordination and subjection and slavery. And people like Carlo Vercellone would also say that we need to think about an economy based in the common fare. Common fare would be the idea that the old welfare institutions, which obviously need to be reformed more as this kind of decentralized cooperative enterprise, dealing with health, dealing with research, dealing with education, insurance, are not an unproductive cost to society, but they constitute the very basis for the development of what economists call human capital, and what they call the kind of the living labor, so the power to make the world. And common fare needs money, but it needs a kind of new form of money. So there have been talk in these kind of circles about a money of the common. If money is no longer what it used to be, if you need to learn again, as Akseli was mentioning before, and the EXA team, we need to learn again what money has become following virtualization, financialization. Then the form of money can be hacked. Kind of fighting over the form of money becomes a form of class struggle. So there was the kind of thinking that we brought to this. So Red Stack Attack was an attempt. It was very much solicited from the collective that there should be some reflection about the technology of money creation. So we kind of we organized an event. I organized an event with my good friend Luciana Parisi at Goldsmiths College, where we tried to bring together this kind of autonomous Marxist and software theorists, from Matt Fuller to Adrian Mackenzie, Andy Goffey, Luciana herself, to try to think about this relationship between software and money after Bitcoin. It was a difficult workshop. It was very difficult to bring these two groups together. But then, I tried to bring it together with this Red Stack Attack piece, saying that if you want to build a new world, if the new form of sovereignty, as somebody like Benjamin Bratton, who's another kind of software theorist, argued, is the stack, is the layering, is this kind of mega infrastructures which are producing new forms of globalization, then you can have a red stack as well. You can have a kind of left stack and you can have these layers. And I was thinking money could be one layer of this new commons-based economy, social networks. They don't need to be this form of exhaustion of social energy. They also can become sites for the production of subjectivity, biohypermedia. Again, new forms of hardware will be part of this stack. So it was, coming from this direction that we found a common ground with the Robin Hood group, and we started. I started attending at first their offices. Robin Hood, which was Exa's previous incarnation, is still going on. It's a financial co-op.
Like our first
Yes.
attempt to gain access to the operating system of finance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exa is like a
It was
second
an interesting, really interesting provocation, and it was the beginning of a research group which was made of various people who would come and go. So I attended a meeting. We had a meeting, and the first one was in Stuttgart with Brian Massume and Erin Manning, philosophers, and Maurizio Lazzarato. Then we met in Dublin in a bank, which was great. Then Brett Scott was involved, who wrote this book about hacking money. And then there was a meeting in Milan, which was very much fun. So I decided to say, okay, let's come and let's meet the activists who are asking or interested in this. Macao is a social center run by artists and creatives in Milan. So we had again these workshops. There was also a very they were also having at the same time. Anna was there. Remember a techno festival. So the kind of this kind of attempts to understand Bitcoin, the blockchain, how it could be turned into a new form of kind of financial power, how we could get over the kind of defeat in the socialist calculation debate in the 1930s were conducted with this very noisy rhythm of hardcore Spanish techno. So I think nobody got any sleep, at least people, yeah? And death metal, sorry, I'd forgotten about that. So there was the soundtrack of the Robin, there did this kind of offices, and then we met again in Athens, where again the issue of this kind of foreclosure of liquidity in some areas of the world. We know that this happened to African nations, it happened to Asian nations in the past. It struck Southern Europe. I come from Southern Europe, I'm Sicilian, I live in Naples. We met in Athens with our Greek friends and comrades, and they told us about the way in which money had become a kind of punishing. Debt became a form of punishment to populations, of the ways they were left without hospital, without basic services. So we can see these really ferocious cuts at work. So for us, the question of, can we hack money? As also Denis Royo, Jaromil, can we produce a form of liquidity? Because we have so much. If you go to places like Athens or like Naples or Barcelona, there is so much social energy, there is so much activity, there is so much, we're talking about environmental struggles, we're talking about social struggle, we're talking about struggles about housing, there is so much energy. And to find not just a form of money, but now even a form of finance, they would be able to sustain people. They're already experimenting with that. Macau has launched its own coin. They're interested in Exa. There are other kind of cryptocurrencies that are circulating in activist milieus. And I think Exa is taking it to the next stage, right? And this is what happened after they moved to the Silicon Valley, the belly of the beast. I was very concerned about their move. I became very suspicious. I was like, they're going to get the Silicon Valley bug, which is, we're going to become the next big thing. So I was like... But, we have to be, maybe a bit more trust and kind of trying to understand the project, because I think it's developing in a very interesting way. And I think it's, this question of moving from currency and coin and tokens to really the possibility of creating liquidity and creating forms of organization that will allow people to support their projects and themselves without having to kind of obey this external this blackmail, really, that's become work today. It's like either you obey or you be exposed to homelessness or you be exposed. I know this is not the case in Sweden, that you still got a good social security system, but I think it's certainly the case in the United States.
Yeah.
It's certainly the case in many other parts of the world. You submit or you are expelled, you become human waste.
Yeah, and there's no doubt.
And this is the kind of what
there's a lot of risks,
interesting.
new risks that have been like pushed towards people. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I have to say, because I would like maybe to give more time again to questions before we break. I'll leave.
Sure, great. Hey, thanks, Tiziana. So, in fact, Dick, would you like to say a couple of words about the risks, the new risks that people and the households are really...
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to, but sure. I mean, I think, and this is again as more true of the Anglo world than people are experiencing in this country. But one of the consequences of what is popularly called neoliberalism, that alleged freedom that comes with the market, is that as the state has withdrawn from providing a whole lot of anchors of social stability, so you find that individuals and the households they live in start to take on more and more risks. We know there are more risks in the labour market because jobs are less secure. But not only that, I mean, if you watch certainly television in the US, you see ads for health insurance, funeral insurance, income insurance, pet insurance, house insurance. You know, every sort of risk you can imagine now creates a financial product. And of course, we move into this generation that says, well, if you don't insure against this risk and something goes wrong or you find yourself you can't afford it, it's your fault, because in this world of the market, you've chosen not to take out the insurance policy. So really, it's a grinding down process done in the name of freedom that actually gives people no freedom at all, because we are compulsorily playing in the market for risk. You can't say, I don't want to play, because if you don't want to play, you carry all the risks yourself. We are, in that sense, becoming what I call hedge funds of our own lives. We're asked to hold a risk, to insure against a risk, etc. And it's creating a whole culture that leads to, I think, logically for me, to the sort of politics that Tiziana's talking about, where you sort of have to say, I don't want to play. I want to be engaged in a different process, a different way of thinking about how to live my life and the economy I want to live in.
So, sorry? With the projects I want to do, I'm thinking about, for example, like research in a university. It's not possible to do free research anymore. Everything comes with strings attached. You have to justify and frame and kind of respect what are the directives and the priorities. So this, you know, you can really feel this tension between, you know, I think I would like to do this with these people, you know, and the fact you have no access to the means of production in this case, which in this case are finance. Yeah. I mean, finance is a means of production now.
I think we have a question here for, yeah.
I was wondering, I'd like to hear what you think is the most interesting artistic gestalt of these new flows and spaces. So, and that refers also to your question when you remark about communication, like how we can communicate and understand these new spaces and flows.
Laura, do you want to take? Laura, do you want to take that?
Well, we have some examples here, obviously, with Goldin and Seneby, in the sense of intervening, in the sense of an intervention within the market as it currently exists. I think it's different from what Tiziana was talking about in this sense, because we are still talking in this sense, in this particular case, about the current market form, but I'm thinking in this moment about other examples of artworks that are already operating in this new crypto space, in these spaces. So I'm thinking, for instance, about the TerraZero project. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They're also associated with the Money Lab Reader. And so this project started as an art project and whose goal was to make a forest, was to create a self-owning forest, basically, based on this new smart contract that is like distributed autonomous organizations. And so allowing the forest to autonomously manage its own resources, and so.
Super.
Sorry, I heard it. And so making a comment also about how this new sorry, I'm a little bit disconnected by that noise. And so making a comment both in terms of the how this new technology are not only blurring the boundaries between nature and culture, but also reposing the question of the post-human in this sense. And so who is an agent, who has agency in this sense? So this is the one of, I think, there's a really new interesting examples of the really the connection between the art, the finance, and the blockchain. There is also Sarah Mijohas, who in 2016 created a work called Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency backed by the value of her own art, and so in this sense understanding art as a commodity from the moment in which it is produced, but in this sense also I think showing in an interesting way how these tokens, these new programmable monies can effectively are not simply assets that represent objects, but that you know, like contain in a way or are indexes of the appreciation of the value of the artist itself. So this is how I remember she put it. I don't know if anyone has any other examples I would like to.
The question coming up there. Yeah, it relates to the whole data mining and how you create bitcoins. Don't you run the risk that, let's say, somebody who can do it very efficiently might be a bank with a lot of capital to mine the currency more efficiently, and thus usurping the means of production? Speaking of Marx, that's one open question.
Yeah, sure. That's one of the problems with the first generations of blockchain, but we are already moving beyond. For instance, in Gravity, there's no mining. It's no longer. It does not work like a blockchain anymore. Basically, you can run a Gravity node with your phone.
There's a question over that too. And after that question, I think we've come to the point when we are going to the next part, which is the coffee break.
Okay, great.
But before the question,
Okay.
There is going to be lots of small tables. And my friends from the Stockholm School of Economics are going to place themselves as they choose and like on the different tables. And they have a little name tag, you know, what they're interested in.
Nice.
So please talk to them about this. Engage the conversation, because there are many different perspectives on this. Sorry, a question.
Do you think that local currencies, regional currencies, were an example of a type of currency that had a social contract built into it or an agenda built into it?
Yes, and still are in some ways. I think they are really interesting precursor, and in some ways they might even have even a brighter future, because I think there are interesting plays, of course, what you can get out of the presence of a network and combining things. Just to pick one up is that because in a programming structure, copying something is so easy, somebody creating a model can easily become 100 different instances. So there's a lot of network effects. But beside that, I think the question of the local is something that remains extremely interesting, and I think there are new forms which you can build out of that. Just to take a very kind of bland practical example, like if you have a drill in your house, you might actually use that to serve the drilling needs of the whole house. The only thing you would need would be a system of people knowing that you have it, and maybe a way of them getting it, and so on and so forth. That's a simple example, but that's serving a locality. It's working with a short distance, and I'm actually looking forward also towards the, let's say, widening the possibilities of local forms as well. So that probably will be supported even with tokens that might still function a bit like a local currency, maybe with some new features on top.
Yeah.
So, but one quick follow-up. The story of many local currencies is how they were shut down in different ways by the government, including through the simple technique of transaction. They get their piece, and that monetizes everything. Everything has to become a currency. So how will you avoid that? That basic fiat that says, okay, do whatever you want, but we want a piece. That monetizes it. You have to have the currency. You're enslaved again.
It's actually a very complicated question with many answers. Like, it starts even, like, I'll just introduce a couple of features that will be make very different our relation to even like currency and the currency we're using or paying something. One is, let's say there is 10,000, 100,000 different currency-like things going on. How do you pay? And actually, people can even ask that. I'm actually accepting payment only in this currency, and you don't have that. And you certainly don't want to go through and check and change at every transaction. But that's something software is good at. Like, you could press that button of paying, and they could tell, because it could automatically tell you that if you transact this here and this here and this here, you get to that what is demanded here, and by changing your currency automatically to that might be really for you just one button press. That opens a lot of other questions which go to the complications of the systems, and why actually one of the key factors in Gravity, which we have worked a lot in, is how to create metric-like exchange. There is no speculation on exchange, because it's kind of necessary for that kind of a system. And so, yeah, so in this sense, that's just one issue. And that changes the relation of how much demand can be put, and allows this possibility of demanding a currency, even if the other person doesn't have that, and kind of forcing them to change to that, which creates demand for that currency and so on. So it's a whole other world.
But
let's see what happens.
I think that question opens up some really important aspects which we haven't dealt with yet. But clearly, this isn't just like messing around. I mean, what we're doing here has radical, serious consequences, and they're political. I mean, the state has supposedly the exclusive right to violence, and it's been called the violence hack. It's very easy and for states to decide, we can no longer tolerate this, and we're going to stop. We're not going to stop at any limits. I mean, if you think about what happened in the Middle East with Iraq, I mean, that's actually about protecting the dollar as much as anything else. And so this is a very serious endeavor, and the stakes are very high, and the solutions are not technocratic. There will be a struggle over the kinds of issuance that we're talking about. Nonetheless, these things are bubbling up because people are sick. I mean, the sort of weak subjectivity that Akseli was talking about, the symptoms of that in the United States, at least, are abjection and psychopathology, and that's what's running the United States right now. So, and there is a lot of ferment, and there is a lot of energy around the possibilities of new economy, and there's demand.
And the energy could be channeled in the discussion 25 minutes outside on the coffee table, but first there is a... wait, there is a footnote. Yeah.
So this is all extremely interesting, and I'd like to add a footnote, which is a reminder of the fact that we're in the context of art. We're at a museum of modern and contemporary art. You're here as part of an art project, as part of a fantastic exhibition. And because art is such an incredible sniffer dog or seismograph, it's been around these areas for quite a while. So I would just like to add to some of the latest questions about recent art history and relevant projects. I think since the 90s, artists have been engaged with almost everything you've been bringing up in different parts of the world. And it's time to write that history. I would just like to point out one art project which became more publicly available in 2012 in Kassel at the Documenta exhibition, which was the Time Bank that Julieta Aranda and Anton Vidokle put together, which condensed in many ways research that a lot of people had been doing over the years on these alternative or parallel currencies. Sure. So there is definitely an art history to precisely what you're talking about already now.
Yeah, and the most important thing in the text, as you know,
I'm
actually.
Gonna answer. Sorry. Yeah. With the Robin Hood hedge fund, we were also at the Documenta then, back then, and one of the, in fact, really interesting things. For instance, this year at the Venice Biennale, kind of where you go through the exhibition, the central exhibition, like, and it's divided into these themes, like production of the common, production of community, space, like how do you connect what the space and time of creation, like how do you break to the field of the possible, to this time. When I went through it, there was a lot of I felt really resonance with the works of art, because basically the artists were working with exactly the same things that we are.
So now it is.
But what was striking? I'm sorry, Pera, this is important. What was striking was that there was total lack of technology, lack of. The artists were building tents, doing dances, lack of technology, lack of finance, and that's like our entrance point is that we need to. These are the technologies we need to take up. Use as our matter and a medium to work.
Great, and now we meet again, let's say 15:20. Coffee space and coffee time and conversation.